Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. Versus returns, and today we got a knockdown, drag-out slugfest between heavyweights of the high horology segment. Independent horology, it's Debethune versus FP Journe. Now these watches are similar in more ways than not. Of course, it's not a perfect comparison. It never is when we're talking about highly individual products. But I feel like we've got a great comparison here on the basis of size, on the basis of features, on the basis of volume, and on the basis of the significance of the watchmakers, that is, the men behind these watches. So we're going to talk about the Bethune DB25xs Starry Varius, which is the new 40mm sized Starry Varius, and the well-known FP Journe Chronometre Bleu. Let the games begin. We're going to start with the watch that we know better. This is a watch that first came out in 2009, and it was initially pitched as a model that would be the point of entry to the FP Journe brand, even below the Chronomet Souverain. Hard to believe now, all these years later, as it's become the best known and the most requested Journe reference, to the point that even though it was retailing for about 42,200 Swiss francs in January of 2025. At the same time, it's been selling pre-owned for between $150,000 and $160,000. So that's what I mean when I say it is the most in demand. Now the watch is 39 millimeters in diameter. You can see it's 8.6 millimeters thick, 45.5 from lug tip to lug tip, with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. I'll throw it on my wrist, and you can see it wears nicely. Both of them do. It's definitely heavier, given that watchmaking gold, 18 karat, is actually slightly lighter than tantalum. So this watch with a solid gold movement, a tantalum case, is quite a bit weightier on the wrist than the Debethune. It is quite flat flush. It sits low on the wrist, and I would even say it's suitable for a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference, so even our ladies can enjoy the icon. Flipping it all over, you can see the movement caliber 1304, manual wind, 3 hertz, free sprung, 6 position adjusted, twin barrels in parallel, 56-hour power reserve. It's the same movement that you'll find on the Chronomet Souverain, but you can see it's specifically labeled Chronometre Bleu, and it does not have the dial side power reserve of the CS. So that is the Chronometre Bleu. We went over the retail price, or as close as I could get to it, the pre-owned price, and also some of the aesthetics, tech features, and ergonomics. Now we're going to jump over to the watch that you probably have seen at least in passing on this channel, the Starry Varius. The DB25 Starry Varius from Debethune debuted back in 2018, but that was a 42mm watch, and Debethune's movement over the last few years has been towards thinner and smaller watches, and this is very much in that vein. So this is still grade 5 titanium, now 40mm in diameter. That's why it's the DB25xs Starry Varius. Of course, Stradivarius, a legendary instrument. That is the basis for that name, Starry Varius. Many have asked, that's the basis. This is also a high-quality precision instrument of the highest level. So 40 in diameter, 10 millimeters thick. It is thicker than the Journe, and from lug tip to lug tip, 47.5, with a bit of an unconventional 22mm spacing. The Journe's 20 again. So throwing it on the wrist, it's very light, being made almost entirely of titanium and sapphire. It may be slightly larger than the Journe, but it feels smaller. You can see down the barrel, it's a little bit broader across the wrist. I'd recommend this watch for wrists as small as 14 centimeters circumference, maybe 13.5 if your wrist is flat across the top. Again, my wrist's 16, but I'm pulling the relatively stiff brand new strap on both of these quite tight, so you can see that it's going to compress my wrist a bit. Here's your over the top, here's your cuff shot. Both of these watches will work just fine with cuffs. On a strap basis, here you can see large rectangular symmetrical scale alligator leather. On the bottom, round scale, and you will find the same thing on the Journe. In terms of strap quality, they are exactly equal, though the Journe does have pull-tab spring bars. You still have to use your strap tool on the buckle itself, and to that end here we have a tantalum pin buckle, and here we have a matching grade 5 titanium pin buckle. Now both these watches are fairly conservative by the standards of their brands. Debethune tends to focus on the avant-garde, and FP Journe has a distinctive house style, and I would even go so far as to say this watch is quite different. And other than the fact that it does have Journe's hands and font, it's so different that absent those features, you probably wouldn't identify it as a Journe timepiece. And this looks nothing like the 29s, the 28s, the 27s, the DBDs, and the DBSs. This is about as restrained and conservative a watch as you will find at Debethune. Now, in terms of the dials, people often ask, this dial is a black polished disc of German silver that is then blue lacquered and printed with off-white, whereas this, we're going to talk about the center, this is a disc of grade 5 titanium that is fired until it turns this distinctive burgundy color. Gold leaf is used for the distant celestial bodies of the Milky Way, and then the near ones are actually inserts of white gold. So these big planets and stars, those are inserts of white gold, and this can be customized to depict basically any location at any time in history. Both of these brands, despite low volume, are extremely vertically integrated. So dials, movements, cases, and even some of the small parts of the movement, like with Debethune, their balance wheel, these are actually all in-house products. So unlike, say, well, Moser is an example of a brand that makes its own movement, but not its cases, bracelets, or dials. Both of these are fully integrated, despite the fact that Journe caps production at 1,000 mechanical watches per year, and Debethune made 331 watches of all descriptions last year, so volume is low. So let's start with the CB. Okay, so advantages here. This is a rare, true investment. In fact, I have been sitting on this video concept for a few months while I waited to have both watches in stock. And in the few months that I've waited, this watch has gone from about 140 to 150,000 used to about 150 to 160,000. That's not a normal state of affairs in the watch space, and I would say that if you want the most iconic watch ever created by the most influential watchmaker of our era, this is it right here. As much as the Tourbillon Souverain, as much as the Resonance, the Chronomet Optimum might have been technical breakthroughs, this is the watch for which Journe will be remembered. So a real investment in a world where I rarely call anything an investment. This is. I would also say it's easily the bargain if you're getting it new. So let's say, I don't know, let's say prices went up from 42,200. Let's say it's now 50,000 Swiss francs. You're still going to make a pile just by buying it new. It's going to increase by leaps and bounds, especially since we've not yet reached the juncture where Journe steps away from actually running the brand as the creative lead at the company. And that moment, when it comes, for whatever reason, is going to be like the moment Enzo Ferrari passed from this world, and you had the Enzo era cars and the post-Enzo cars. Journe is more likely to become a school teacher and run master classes for the rest of his life. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon, but there will be a time when he steps away from actually creating the watches at FP Journe, and those watches that he created will become worth even more. So if you can buy this new, do so. You will never lose a cent. Smaller and slimmer. Not only is it thinner by quite a margin, 8.6 millimeters versus 10, but it is quite a bit smaller lug tip to lug tip at 45.5 versus 47.5 on the Debethune. I would also say that the solid gold movement is a surprise and delight feature. When you explain this to your friends, they won't be critical of the fact that the finish is a combination of mechanical and manual, or that Romain Gaultier and Laurent Ferrier give you better finish for less money. They'll be awestruck that the bridges and the plates are made of 18-karat gold. And even now, 21 years after Journe first started doing this at scale, it's still very impressive. I would also say that the architecture of the movement on these, equally impressive. I'm not going to give the win to either one. I'm just going to say that they're both impressive on that basis, that the shape, the proportion, the relative positioning of the parts, deeply attractive in both cases. But this one is made of solid gold. What else am I going to say? Well, this is a true icon, and it's rare that you would call something that's only 16 model years old an icon. but it is. It's already up there with the Submariners, the Reversos, the Speedmaster Professionals, and the Royal Oaks. So this is separate from the idea of it being a bargain if you can buy it new or a true investment. An icon is not necessarily something that's infinitely valuable, and the Moonwatch is a great example of that. It's something that is an eternal classic, and this is that. In fact, it will only become more so with time. This is not hype, it's simply a matter of fact. Also, I would say that this watch is closely identified with a modern master. Journe can be a controversial figure, sure, but as a watchmaker, he's a trendsetter, he's a scholar, he's everything you would want in your watchmaker. Maybe he's not your buddy. Maybe he's not the best guy to bring out on the town. Maybe he's not someone you identify with on a personality basis. Everyone knows he can be a little bit grumpy, but at the end of the day, look what he's done and how he's changed the landscape for independent watchmakers. Even though he was not the first, he has been by far the most impactful, and this watch is always going to be associated with him in the same way Butzi Porsche will always be associated with the 911. So, what else can I say? This is a watch with running seconds. This is not. So some people want to have a lively watch, and this is more that than this watch. This has a dead dial. This has running seconds. To some, big deal. And I'll also say it is heavy for its size. For those who believe that an expensive watch should have some weight to it, this does. And for those who believe a watch should have some heft, remember, this tantalum is heavier than 18 karat gold, so a similar sized gold watch would be slightly lighter. Now, the Debethune. Let's talk a little bit about the economics here. First, this watch costs $80,000 new, as you see it here. It just came out at Geneva Watch Days this year, 2025. So $80,000 is pretty much the only way you're going to find it new. There aren't any pre-owned on the market right now, and this is a new watch. But I can say that for the previous 42mm Starry Varius, two hands, titanium case, same movement, they're going for about $70,000 on the market, but the limited editions like the Cadran Jaune, those are more like $140,000. And so, you know, you're sort of looking at a market that's all over the place, from fairly close to retail to well above retail for one of these, though its multiplier as a pre-owned watch is not nearly as high as the Journe. If anything, you'll probably lose a little bit at first and then make it up as time goes along. Remember, like I said, the previous 42mm retails for about $70,000, whereas this is going to be about $80,000 right now new. Okay, also important, it is going to be easier to get one of these. Not necessarily an easy watch to get, but I would say that the wait's going to be probably about 6 to 12 months to get one of these new, whereas for the Chronometre Bleu, if you don't have a purchase history, they're not even going to start the clock. So this is more obtainable. And I would also say that on a technical basis, it's beaten the pants off the Journe. So this is a 6-day power reserve. This is 56 hours. This features all sorts of patented elements, like self-adjusting barrels that can't be overwound and damaged. We have 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs on the balance, and this technology has been tested in pro sports to no consequence. A proprietary balance wheel to minimize the effect of aerodynamic drag and temperature change. A hairspring curve that is itself patented to breathe concentrically like an overcoil, but remain flat like a flat hairspring, and thus allowing the watch to be thinner in profile, but also more shock resistant like a flat hairspring. You can use a little bit of silicone in here. If you look carefully, you can see Debethune's proprietary silicone escape wheel is present and correct. So in terms of shock resistance, durability, power reserve, even things like not allowing you to overwind and damage it, this does have the advantage. It's not just the huge power reserve. There is more going on here. I would also say that the watch features less baggage. Like I said, Journe is sort of like a love or hate character, whereas Denis Flageolet of Debethune is universally respected, but a very low-key guy. I don't even know how you would describe the two of them. I would say that if F.P. Journe is sort of like Babe Ruth, and, you know, he's kind of a little bit brash and in your face and a little bit controversial, Denis Flageolet is a little bit more like Lou Gehrig, just as talented, but his quiet dignity is his defining trait. They're equally capable watchmakers, but I think that if you identify with a Denis Flageolet, this is going to be your watch. And I would also say the custom dial option adds a lot of flexibility. Go ahead and ask FP Journe to customize this dial. Unless your name begins with Your Highness, My guess is you're not going to get a custom Journe dial, but you can absolutely customize this one. So flexibility is good. Plus, there's also an option for a rose gold version of the watch if you want a little bit more color. Materially better fit and finish on the movement. Now, I know the Journe is an excellent timekeeper because I once timed one in 6 positions, and it was gaining about 2.7 seconds per 24 hours. So it's a very good movement mechanically, but in terms of decoration, this is going to lap it. And just taking a look at some of these elements, the stripes that are mirrored from side to side, the solarization of the barrel covers, the micro beveling of the ratchet wheel, the bevels that are double stacked and mirrored and rounded on the edge of the barrel bridge and the barrel bridge cover, and then again on the edge of the base plate cover. You could see the entire bracing system for the triple parachute springs, fired and polished up here, polished and beveled down here with these flanking springs. You could see that the bridge itself is continuously rounded and mirrored and even tapers as it moves toward the side. You expect this from Grubel 4C, maybe not from Debethune, but you should. Raise your expectations with Debethune because their finish is as good as any in the industry. Whereas here, the finish is very good, but that doesn't disguise the fact that these bevels are straight as an arrow, and if you get close enough, you can actually see the milling marks from the machining wheel that made them. This is good finish, but it's not virtuosity. This is virtuosity. Now, what else does it have going on? I would say that if you want a lot of patented proprietary technology, if you are a technophile, then this is definitely going to be your watch. So FP Journe does a lot of interesting things, but all of his major technical breakthroughs have come on other watches, the Optimum, the Resonance, the Tourbillon, and more. The Chronometre Bleu is primarily an aesthetic triumph and breakthrough. So if you want the more technically advanced watch, protected by more original patents, it's going to be this. And by the way, remember what I said about the personalities of the watchmakers being very different? They were actually business partners in the 1990s, and they got along just fine, but you really are talking about fire and ice. FP Journe, look how boldly he brands this thing. Not just his name in large text, but he invented and made it. Whereas with Denis Flageolet, not only is his name not on the dial, you can barely even see the company logo up at 12 o'clock. Just studying contrasts tells you everything you need to know about the men behind these watches. Now, I would also say here, far less common, and that might be a surprise. This is a more difficult watch to obtain, but there are more of them. Journe makes a lot of them. Even in 2017, a year the company made only about 660 watches, 110 of those were the Chronometre Bleu, and that's pretty much the state of affairs year after year, decade after decade. So while these are hard to get in the sense that allocations are scarce at the boutique and prices are high on the aftermarket, they're not as scarce in the world as the Starry Varius. And when you take this new 40mm Starry Varius that essentially no one has right now, you are talking a much less common watch. You're not going to encounter another one at a watch club meetup. So there is a lot to like with both of these watches. If you want the investment, if you want the icon, if you want a watch that is inextricably linked to its founder, then you go with the Chronometre Bleu. If you are perhaps interested in decoration, technical innovation, mechanical spec, customization, or, like I said, the quiet dignity of Denis Flageolet, then you're going to be more drawn to this one. Now, everyone understands that I could easily put my fist on the scale and pick a winner here, but because folks know how I feel about both of these brands, I'm going to trust you to take the facts that I've dispensed today, and on the weight of those facts, draw your own opinions. I am a biased party, though I have respect for both watches and both watchmakers. So let me know in the comment box below, what would you take? Debethune DB25xs Starry Varius or FP Journe Chronometre Bleu? Even better, let me know, if cost were no object, which of these would you pick? And until next time, time out.